Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are getting into a huge Supreme Court ruling, one that deals with a question that honestly affects every single person who owns property.
And no, this isn't just some abstract legal theory. We're talking about a real, fundamental constitutional question that India's Supreme Court just had to answer. And believe me, their decision is going to have ripple effects for years to come.
All right, so let's jump right in. What we're looking at here is a classic tension, right? It's your individual right to your own property, clashing with the government's duty to look out for everyone, the whole community.
You know, finding that balance is basically what constitutional law is all about. But for decades, there's been this one little phrase in the Indian Constitution that's caused a huge amount of argument. It's been like a legal tug-of-war.
So to really get what the court decided, we've got to rewind a bit. We need to look at the source of all this disagreement, which is this one single clause in the Constitution that people have been fighting over for like 40 years.
Okay, so look at the wording here. It says the state should distribute the material resources of the community for the common good. But what does that actually mean? Material resources of the community, is that your house, your land, your company? Or does it just mean stuff the government already owns, like forests and minerals?
Well, that vagueness led to two totally different ways of looking at it. On one side, you had the broad view, basically saying material resources means everything. Public, private, you name it, if it can help the community, it counts. But then you had the narrow view, which said, whoa, hold on, it only means things the public already owns. And with two opposite ideas floating around, you can imagine the legal mess it created.
So this whole thing finally blew up with a case in Mumbai. We're talking about thousands of old, dilapidated buildings. You know, the kind that are literally falling apart and are super dangerous. The state wanted to take them over, redevelop everything, and make it safe. But the owners, of course, they pushed back. And that fight went all the way up to the Supreme Court, forcing a huge 9-judge bench to step in and finally give a clear answer. Okay, so after decades of back and forth, what did the Supreme Court actually say?
Well, and this is what's so interesting, they didn't just pick a winner. They didn't go with the super broad view or the super narrow one. Instead, they carved out a much more nuanced, middle ground solution.
First things first, and this is a big deal for anyone who owns property. The court said, nope, you can't just call all private property a community resource. That puts a really important limit on government power. It's a clear protection for individual rights. But, and this is where the balance comes in, they also said that private property doesn't get a free pass. It's not totally off limits. They ruled that in some very specific situations, if a private asset is absolutely vital for the public, then yes, it can be treated as a community resource.
And you can really hear this thinking in the Chief Justice's own words. He talked about this delicate task of balancing individual rights with the goal of a welfare state. The point is, the Constitution values both. It's not an either-or situation. It's about making both work together.
So that begs the obvious question, right? If it's not all private property, then how in the world do you decide which property counts? Thankfully, the court didn't just leave us hanging.
They actually gave us a test, a set of factors to look at for each specific case. You have to ask, what kind of resource is it? How much does the community really need it? Is it rare? And what happens if it stays in private hands? Is that bad for everyone else? It's not a simple checklist. It forces you to really think about the specifics each and every time. And to help with this thinking, the court brought up something called the public trust doctrine. Think of it like this. There are some resources, like clean air, water, forests, that are so essential they really belong to everyone. The government's job is to act like a trustee, protecting them for the public. So that same kind of logic can help identify other resources that are just naturally communal. Okay, let's step back from all the legal jargon for a second. What does all of this actually mean in the real world? What's the big picture here?
So this ruling does a few really important things. One, it gives us much-needed clarity after decades of confusion. Two, it puts strong protections in place for property owners. Three, it basically endorses a balanced, mixed economy, not extreme socialism or capitalism. And four, it gives the government the power to act for the common good, but, and this is the crucial part, it makes them prove it. The government now has to justify why your property is so essential for everyone else.
And all of this really leaves us with a huge question to think about, doesn't it? The court gave us the how, a framework for making these decisions, but the what is still up for grabs. It's up to all of us now to figure out what resources are so vital, so essential to our society that an individual's right to own them has to take a back seat to the needs of the community as a whole.